The teenage Leslie had visions of sinking her teeth with voracious delight into the Big Apple, not becoming the recipient of its bloody fangs. She had bravely traveled for long days and nights on a crowded, uncomfortable bus from one shore of the U.S. to another. Her courage had led her to believe in a dream that the journey across the entire country from Olympia, Washington, would materialize a better life in the bustling city rather than the limited opportunities and options that the Pacific Northwest town offered. Perhaps she was running from something rather than to, but it didn't matter to the pimps and the sex traffickers that slithered in the pools of New York, hawking their product of flesh and deprivation to the willing seekers. New York Square at the time was a cesspool likened to the mind's imagination of Dante's Inferno in his 9 circles of hell, with the ooze of perverted deviance assaulting the senses, with smells of sex and fear enthralling the tortured minds of psychopaths, fetishists, and predators. It was with simple little lies that the traffickers were able to lure and capture the vulnerable teenage runaways that entered New York City through the gates of damnation that was the Port Authority bus station. The promises that the pimps would use of care and goodwill that they told the naive prey from Middle America was so prevalent in the area that it was dubbed the Minnesota Strip. With the lies of being housed, fed, and protected, the traffickers would put the newcomers on the street as sex workers, for sale as fresh meat, to repay the kindness the pimp had offered. This was what happened to Leslie. After arriving in New York City and being trapped by a pimp, it was as a sex worker that she met a man who introduced himself as Tommy. Over drinks in a bar, Tommy had coaxed the petite 5'4" blonde into trusting him with kind words and gentle actions. He had told her he was a husband and father of 3. Did he apply his smooth vulnerability, telling her some sob story about his wife not loving him and being cruel? Did he tell her about the wonderful father he was to his children and break down her defenses? He asked questions about her life, expressing sympathy for her plight and letting her know that he wanted to be her friend. He offered to help facilitate her escape by taking her to a bus station in New Jersey to get out of the city and back to safety. This stranger seemed to be a kind soul offering a life raft in a putrid sea of despair and darkness. On their way to the station, he offered to stop for dinner to fill her belly. But before setting back to the bus station, the man asked if he could pay her for sex before she left. The money would help her get on her feet, ironically. This man gained her trust. After all, Johns don't take sex workers out to dinner, drinks, and deliverance from evil. They don't offer to help vulnerable young teenagers in need. At the hotel, he continued to incorporate his soft, caring skills into Leslie's consent to soothe her by letting him give her a massage. She took her clothes off and laid on her stomach on the bed, and the predator seized his prey. He pounced on her back and put a knife to her throat. In his maniacal, cold, sinister voice, he told her to shut up, that she was his whore, that she had to be punished, and that she was his to do with whatever he wanted. After all, he had bought and paid for her. The formerly mild-mannered Tommy said this innumerable times, and that the other girls had taken it, and that she had to take it too. He handcuffed her hands behind her back and proceeded his seemingly endless evil torture. Richard Cottingham was born November 25th, 1946, Sagittarius. Oh boy, so much to unpack there. Those of you who don't know Sages, they have this ability to melt your heart with their vulnerability and tenderness. And once you're relaxed, they turn on a DEF-CON level seduction attention to your sexual energy. They make a sport out of their need for you to fall in love with them, no matter who they truly are. And some of them will use that defenseless attraction to their advantage with an immature disregard for your welfare. They are masters of persuasion and promise with their rhythmic purring in your ear. Well, that was certainly true in this case. Richard was born in the Bronx to William and Anna. He was the last of 3 children. His parents had already had 2 daughters. Good Lord, the only boy and the baby? He did not fit the typical serial killer profile of abused, neglected child having suffered a trauma with animal cruelty tendencies. The family was devout in their Catholic religion, and they were active in their community. William worked at MetLife as vice president in Manhattan and provided well for his family. Anna was a homemaker and devoted to her children with love and care. Richard was a handsome kid who had friends and even raised pigeons and fed deer. During this time in the US and Richard's fundamental years of learning about the world around him, it was not unusual to have graphic magazines whose enticement for purchase was the degradation of women. Covers of voluptuous women bound, clothes ripped, if any, face contorted in fear, helpless, and terror were usually the best predictor of mass demand. Inside the pages were stories of horrific and dehumanizing true crime, detective, war crime stories written with graphic detail about pornography, bondage, and torture, to adventure tales of the South Sea with beheadings, shrunken heads, Ed Gein's favorite, and cannibalism. The plots of savage acts perpetrated against women by men were repeated over and over with heart-pounding torture and terror, the only difference between them being the application. The more the graphic, obscene, and degrading, the better for profit. These depictions were in easy access to anyone at any newspaper stand, candy shop, or grocery store, right next to Time Life and Harper's Bazaar.